In the genre of gangster rap, few groups hold the influence, name recognition, and album sales of NWA. After all, they were some of the first rappers to bring gritty, violent, and serious lyrical content depicting the struggles and exploits of urban youth on the West Coast to the genre. And despite their notoriety and worldwide success, NWA was actually fairly short-lived. Initially formed in 1987, the group only lasted 4 years until all members split off to pursue solo careers. This was not without its fair share of controversy, however. So if you're watching this video and know even the slightest bit about NWA, chances are you already know the story, as it has been told time and time again in various hip-hop documentaries and interviews, so I'll try to make it as quick as I can. Eric Eazy-E Wright, former drug dealer and gang member turned entrepreneur and de facto leader of NWA, struck up a deal with famed music manager Jerry Heller in 1987 to form Ruthless Records. It goes without saying, NWA and Jerry Heller couldn't be any further apart in terms of lifestyle and upbringing. And when it became apparent just how well off Heller was, while the rest of the group struggled to get their careers off the ground, cracks would begin to show in the group's foundation. Despite receiving very little radio airplay, Straight Outta Compton, released August of 1988, was very much a grassroots, word-of-mouth success. It also inspired quite a bit of negative media attention, as songs like the title track and Fuck the Police garnered heated criticism from conservative organizations and even got NWA in hot water with the FBI. But while NWA was certainly moving units, some of the members felt that they weren't getting the fair share of the royalties, which prompted O'Shea Ice Cube Jackson, a heavy contributor to the lyric writing process, to quit in December 1989. Ice Cube then embarked on a quickly booming solo career, while NWA took shots at him in the press and on their forthcoming material. NWA's second and final album produced by Dr. Dre was by far their darkest yet, showing that the group knew they had something to prove after Ice Cube's departure. This album would see the group double down on the intensely violent and antagonistic lyrical content that mired them in controversy from the start. It also featured numerous references to Ice Cube, which would ultimately lead to Cube's venomous response in No Vaseline, which would go down in history as one of the most damaging diss tracks of all time. Not long after, Andre Young, better known as Dr. Dre, had also fell into a rift with Eazy-E over the same issues that caused Ice Cube to leave 2 years earlier. It was safe to say at this point it made much more sense for the rest of the group to splinter off onto solo work than to continue to work together as a skeleton crew under the NWA moniker. NWA would dissolve without ever returning a shot at Ice Cube. Of course, some of the group's former members would find themselves much more successful in the aftermath than others. Dr. Dre, with the help of mafia-esque business partner Suge Knight, was able to secure his release from Ruthless Records by means of physical intimidation. Dr. Dre, with Knight and other associates, were able to quickly establish Death Row Records and cement a distribution deal with Interscope Records for the 1992 release of Dre's hip-hop masterpiece, The Chronic. While Dre did in fact lightly diss Ice Cube on the album as a response, the two would find themselves on amicable terms, with Ice Cube even making a cameo appearance on the music video for Dre's Let Me Ride. 1993 would be one of the more interesting years for Dre, as he had now established himself as a premier solo act in hip-hop and had begun to produce songs and albums for his Death Row companions. Ice Cube and Dr. Dre's rekindled friendship would see the two again collaborating, and they teased an album together in late 1993. This album, titled Helter Skelter, would never see the light of day. In 1994, both Dre and Cube would be interviewed about the new record, teasing a 1995 release.
No, actually, I'm just getting ready to put full steam ahead on the Helter Skelter project.
Right.
You know.
When can we look forward to that, though? Because I want to hear something. You know what I'm saying? You and
Good
Cube
question.
together. You and Cube together. That's slamming.
Yeah, probably next year sometime.
Next year sometime.
Next summer.
Although this album never came to fruition, the two did release Natural Born Killers, a single found on the soundtrack for the Snoop Dogg short film Murder Was the Case. Natural Born Killers is a grim, ultra-violent track with nightmarish synths, funky bass, and lyrics that detail the two going on a schizophrenic mass killing spree, name-dropping notorious murderers like Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, and O.J. Simpson. It's the perfect single for Dre and Ice Cube to demonstrate their collaborative strength, and it certainly leaves one wanting to hear more from the two. So, what exactly was the deal with Helter Skelter? Why was it never released?
And I'm the diggy diggy doc, y'all. Pumping it, yes, y'all. D.O.C on the festival, been kicking fresh, y'all.
The D.O.C., real name Tracy Curry, was actually a part of the NWA extended family dating all the way back to 1987. The D.O.C. actually played a heavy role in ghostwriting many verses for Eazy-E and Dr. Dre during their tenure in NWA, and was an integral partner in the founding of Death Row in 1991. The D.O.C., sometimes referred to as the Doc, while not channeling the crime-based lyricism of his NWA counterparts, released his own album on Ruthless Records in 1989 titled No One Can Do It Better. This record featured clean, lyrically complex raps with music that was much more danceable. It's arguable that the Doc's lyricism was as good, if not better, than some of his NWA peers. In November of 1989, a real tragedy struck when an inebriated Curry fell asleep at the wheel and spun off of the freeway into a tree. Medics were unable to sedate him, being they were unaware of exactly what intoxicants were in his body. Curry, being still awake after the crash, fought with medics as they attempted to insert a breathing tube, which left his larynx horribly damaged. After 2 weeks in the hospital, the Doc would find himself on the long path of physical recovery, but some things could not be repaired. His voice was now gone, sounding gurgled and raspy. Hip-hop's newest up-and-comer's voice was irreparably damaged, shattering his biggest dreams. So the Doc soldiered forward, jumping ship with Dre to form Death Row and further contributing to the writing process on future releases, but was unable to find the confidence in himself or from any of his peers to record a follow-up to his debut album. Dre was always a fantastic producer, but a writer he has never been, so the D.O.C. wrote many of the verses found on the Chronic and subsequent Dre releases. By the time that Helter Skelter was in the works, Dre even tapped Doc to write dark, brooding verses, even giving him dystopian and apocalyptic novels to read for inspiration. It was at this time, though, that he started to feel disillusioned with the Death Row hierarchy, that he was not receiving his fair cut of the money being raked in, and not receiving credit or adoration that Dre was for releasing these hit albums. In his frustration, the D.O.C. finally exited Death Row in 1994, taking his lyrics and song ideas reserved for the Dre and Cube collaboration with him. The result would be a D.O.C. solo album, also titled Helter Skelter, released in January 1996. The D.O.C.'s Helter Skelter was a much bleaker, gangster rap-tinged affair than his first release, that incorporated a greater variety of lyrical themes than what was slated to be on the album in its original form. While some songs tangled with the aforementioned themes of dystopian fiction, others deal directly with Doc's departure from Death Row Records. With Doc's harsh and guttural vocals, the album is a splash of cold water for anyone who grew up with his debut album, but it grows on the listener as the album continues.
Hope you get your voice back, G, 'cause we feel that we would be at a loss of B. D.O.C. couldn't make more.
Unfortunately, this record was neither a critical nor commercial success and remains an oft-forgotten piece of the tangled web that is the tumultuous saga of Death Row Records. Interestingly, as the years have passed, some of the beats from the original Dr. Dre and Ice Cube Helter Skelter have leaked out, one of which seems to bear a striking similarity to a beat that was featured on D.O.C.'s album. It would appear Curry had tapped his then producer Erotic D to approximate the music saved for the 1994 album to use on his new release. So as it stands, Ice Cube and Dr. Dre's Helter Skelter was shelved permanently after the D.O.C.'s departure, but this isn't very shocking information to me, as Dre's had a penchant for teasing albums, then quietly canceling them outright. It's unlikely we'll ever hear what they could have cooked up, but given it was still in the early idea stages, I doubt any recorded material with Dre and Ice Cube outside of Natural Born Killers exists. And at this point, Dr. Dre probably has about dozens of albums worth of material that he's not released and probably doesn't plan on releasing.